My name is Karen. I'm 29. For the last few years, I've tried so hard to believe my family still loved me the way they used to. I'm not some tragic case, no criminal record, no scandal, no dramatic fallout, just a woman who drifted away from the family mold, who chose a quieter path while my parents and younger brother stayed wrapped up in their own perfect world. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe the fact that I didn't fit into their narrative anymore meant I stopped existing for them. But I wasn't prepared for what happened on my birthday. I'd like to say I saw it coming, but the truth is I didn't. I still held on to some naive hope that they'd surprise me or at least send a thoughtful message. What I got instead was silence. Let me rewind. My birthday fell on a Saturday this year, July 6th. I made plans a month in advance. Nothing huge, just dinner at a nice restaurant in town, followed by drinks at my apartment. I invited about a dozen people, a mix of coworkers, 2 friends from college who still live nearby, and of course, my family. I texted my parents and my brother Ryan weeks ahead. I even reminded them again the Sunday before. My mom's reply was short. "We'll see, honey. Things are a bit hectic lately," but I didn't read too much into it. Hectic was normal for them. Ryan didn't reply at all. I should have taken the hint. The day arrived. I cleaned the place top to bottom, picked up cupcakes from the bakery my mom used to love, and even got a few candles for the table, something my dad always teased me about, calling me sentimental to a fault. I checked the time constantly, expecting at any moment to hear a knock or get a call asking for the building code. But when the clock hit 6:30 p.m., my phone was still silent. My friends started arriving around 7 o'clock. Sophia and Jordan brought wine. Mark had this stupid inflatable birthday crown he made me wear. We laughed, played music, told dumb stories, but every few minutes, I found myself glancing at the door. By 8, I cracked and called my mom. She picked up after a few rings. Her voice was cheerful, full of background noise and music. "Hey, sweetheart," she said like nothing was wrong. "Hey, are you guys still coming? Dinner started an hour ago." There was a pause. Then she sighed and said, "Karen, we're busy right now celebrating something that actually matters. Ryan got promoted. It's a huge step for him. He's been working so hard, and we didn't want to miss this moment." I blinked, staring at the ceiling like it would somehow help the words make more sense. "You didn't want to miss it, so you skipped my birthday." "Don't be dramatic," she said. "You're almost 30. Do we really need to throw you a party every year?" My jaw clenched. "I didn't ask for a party. I asked for you to show up." "Well," she said, suddenly defensive. "We can't be everywhere at once. You should be happy for your brother. He's worked his tail off for this, and we're proud of him. Try not to make this about yourself." I don't remember what I said after that. I hung up not long later, numb. I walked back into the room with a fake smile and a fresh beer. When the last of my friends left around midnight, I sat in the living room alone, the deflated crown still resting on the table next to a half-eaten tray of sliders. The next morning, I scrolled through the photos we'd taken and found one of me sitting on the couch surrounded by the 5 people who had actually shown up. It wasn't staged, wasn't glamorous, but it was real. Their smiles weren't forced. So, I posted it. No passive-aggressive caption, no call-out, just grateful for the family that chose me. I didn't expect a response. In fact, I muted the family group chat after posting it. But about 3 hours later, there was a loud knock at my door. I looked through the peephole and saw both my parents standing outside, furious. My dad's face was red. My mom looked like she had a prepared speech loaded and ready. I hesitated. My first instinct was to open it and hear them out. But then I saw Ryan standing a few feet back by the elevator, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like he was watching a soap opera. I stood there behind the door, heart racing. I hadn't seen any of them show this much urgency in years. My phone buzzed. On the table behind me. A text from my mom. "Open the door, Karen. This is childish." I didn't. I watched through the peephole as my dad knocked again, harder this time. My mom yelled something I couldn't quite hear, then turned and gestured at Ryan, who just shrugged. Eventually, they left. But that was only the beginning. Later that day, I got an email from my dad. Long, dramatic, full of talk about family, loyalty and not airing private matters online. He said the post was a slap in the face after everything they'd done for me. Then he had the nerve to mention a time they'd helped me pay rent once 2 years ago when I lost my job in the pandemic. I'd paid them back within 4 months, but now it was being used like a favor I could never repay. The group chat lit up with messages. Ryan said I was jealous and attention-seeking. My aunt chimed in, "Couldn't you have just let your brother have his moment?" My cousin even added a passive comment about how some people never grow up, and not one of them stopped. To think, why was I celebrating with friends instead of family in the first place? The worst part, I started to believe them. For a while, I sat in my apartment that evening and went over the conversation in my head 100 times. Was I being petty, immature? Should I have just let it go? But then I remembered the look on my mom's face when she said it, something that actually matters. Like my birthday. I didn't matter at all. That was the moment something in me shifted. I started going back through old emails, bank records, shared expenses, times I'd loaned money to Ryan when he couldn't make rent after dropping out of school the first time. The birthday gifts I bought for my parents every Christmas, every year, often more expensive than I could afford. The messages they never replied to. The photos I wasn't in. The trips they didn't invite me on, always with an excuse. And then I found something. Something I hadn't looked at in years. The foundation paperwork. I hadn't thought about it since college, but it was still active, still in my name, and they clearly had no idea. That's when the real plan began to form. I stayed up most of that night. The glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows across the room while my thoughts darted between memories and plans. I hadn't touched the family foundation paperwork in nearly 8 years. It was something my grandfather had set up when he was still alive. A small nonprofit meant to support scholarships, community projects, things like that. He'd trusted me with it back when I was the one in the family who actually showed up for Sunday dinners, helped with errands, listened without judgment. Back when I mattered. After his passing, no one really paid attention to it. My parents talked about shutting it down a few times, but I kept it going with small grants and quiet contributions. I didn't have much, but I believed in it. I didn't tell anyone I was the one still funding it. Maybe part of me hoped that if I just kept doing the right thing, they'd notice. They never did. What they did do, however, was start attaching their names to the foundation's events, banquets, donation drives, school sponsorships. I remember seeing photos on my mom's Facebook of her posing next to oversized checks I'd signed. At the time, I let it go. I told myself, if it helps people, it doesn't matter who gets the credit. But after that phone call on my birthday, something inside me finally broke. Not in a loud, dramatic way. More like a door quietly closing for good. I went through the documents carefully. As the sole legal owner and trustee, I had full authority. That meant every public use of the foundation's name required my signature, none of which I'd been giving. I also noticed something else, a big transaction, a $30,000 allocation request labeled as sponsorship for Ryan's new startup. I stared at the screen for a long time. They hadn't even asked me. They were using the foundation like it was their personal bank. My grandfather would have lost his mind if he knew. This wasn't about family anymore. This was theft, entitlement, and manipulation, dressed up in suits and champagne toasts. So, I rejected the request. Then, I locked the account, froze all spending, flagged the most recent transactions for review. And while I was at it, I reached out to the accountant my grandfather had once worked with, an older man named Leonard, who still remembered me as the only honest one in that whole pack. I told him what had happened. I asked him to do a quiet audit. Within 24 hours, he found discrepancies, thousands of dollars misused for personal expenses, all under the guise of community development. Vacations, home repairs, even a catered engagement party for Ryan, booked under a youth outreach banquet. I sat there reading through every line item, my hands shaking, not from rage, but from something colder. Clarity. It wasn't just my birthday they didn't care about. It was me. My role in this family was never about love or respect. It was about what I could give. So, I stopped giving. I drafted a letter to the board, all appointed by me, thankfully, outlining the misuse of funds and suspending all family-affiliated events pending investigation. I restructured the foundation's mission to include an external oversight committee, one that didn't include a single relative. And for the first time in years, I added my own name back onto the website. Not out of ego, just as a reminder to myself. I built this. I kept it alive. The morning after I submitted the paperwork, my door buzzed. It was my mother. She looked more annoyed than angry, arms crossed, dressed like she had come from church or brunch, someplace public where appearances mattered. "Karen," she said the moment I opened the door. "We need to talk." Behind her stood my dad, stony-faced, and Ryan, smirking like he was watching a sitcom unfold. I stepped aside and let them in. Not because I wanted to, but because I wanted them to see just how calm I was. The apartment was clean, quiet, nothing dramatic. No shouting match waiting to happen. "You made a very poor decision," my dad said the moment the door shut. My mom added, posting that photo online, implying, "We don't care." That was cruel. Ryan didn't say anything. Just leaned against the wall with that smug little half-grin like he knew he'd still come out on top. I sat down on the arm of the couch and looked at all three of them. "You missed my birthday," I said. "That's not fair," my mom replied instantly. "We told you. We were at Ryan's promotion dinner. Right, I said, nodding slowly. Something that actually mattered. They paused. My dad shifted his weight. Ryan shrugged. It wasn't personal, my mom continued. You thought wrong? I interrupted. My voice was low. Even you've been using the foundation to fund your events and lifestyle without permission. You've been taking money meant for scholarships and putting it toward parties and startups. Ryan bristled. That's personal, my dad said. No, I said, standing up. You haven't always. I have. After a tense pause, I turned to face them, feeling a quiet strength I hadn't felt in years. I've always been the one funding it. I've always been the one upholding Grandpa's legacy while you put your names on the banners and reaped the rewards. Ryan crossed his arms, a smirk still playing on his lips. And now you're what? Going to shut us all out over a few $1,000s? This is petty. I glared at him. It's not just about money. It's about respect. About how you all have used me, the foundation, everything I've built, for your own gain without a second thought. You're not getting away with it anymore. My mom's voice softened, but there was a tremble in it now. Karen, this isn't how families handle things. You can't just cut everyone off like this. I stood taller, meeting her gaze with unwavering certainty. Maybe that's how you handle things. But I won't. I've learned a lot over the years, and I'm done being the one who's always expected to fix things for everyone else. My dad's face reddened, his fists clenching at his sides. You're making a huge mistake. You'll regret this. No, I replied firmly, you will. I took a deep breath. The foundation is done with you. No more events, no more connections. You're all removed from every position of influence. And I'm done pretending like we're a family. You don't get to use me anymore. I reached for my phone and brought up the foundation's website. There it was, clear as day, an official announcement of their removal, signed by me. Their names were gone, replaced with those who truly believed in the mission. The room went cold, and the silence that followed spoke louder than anything they could have said. My mom's eyes flickered with disbelief, and my dad opened his mouth to argue, but no words came out. Ryan, still silent, stood there, unable to mask the unease in his eyes. I stood there, feeling the weight of what I had done. This wasn't just about business or money. It was about reclaiming my life. Reclaiming my dignity. Reclaiming the foundation. That was mine. Finally, I spoke again. I hope you all realize that this was your choice. I didn't force you into this. You could have been there for me, but instead, you chose to take from me, just like you always have. They didn't answer. My mom turned first, slowly walking towards the door. My dad followed, muttering something under his breath. Ryan hesitated, his gaze locked on me for a moment, a bitter smile on his lips. You really think this is the end, Karen? You think you've won? I looked him dead in the eyes. Oh, Ryan, I already have. With that, I closed the door behind them. Not with anger, but with the finality of knowing I'd made the right decision. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The quiet that followed their departure felt different this time. There was no anxiety, no sense of guilt gnawing at my insides. I wasn't waiting for a call or an apology anymore. I wasn't hoping for their approval or validation. I had made my choice, and it had nothing to do with them. It was about me reclaiming what was mine, my life, my family, my worth. I spent the next few days working through the audit Leonard had sent me. It was shocking, but also strangely reassuring. Every forged signature, every misused penny, felt like a weight lifting from my shoulders. This wasn't just about a broken family, it was about integrity. About doing what was right, even when no one else would. The phone rang constantly in those days, my mom, my dad, even Ryan, each trying to plead their case. But I didn't pick up. I had no interest in their excuses anymore. They had shown me who they truly were, and I wasn't willing to go back to pretending everything was fine. The pressure of all those years, of being the one who held everything together, started to fade. I could breathe again. I turned my attention to the foundation, the work that really mattered. I took steps to ensure that nothing like what had happened to me could happen to anyone else. I brought in new people to help, real people who cared about the cause, not about how much they could exploit it. The first public event without my family was a huge success. It felt right, seeing the community come together for a real cause. I looked around at the volunteers, the donors, the students whose lives were being impacted. These were the people I was meant to be with. They weren't the ones I had to sacrifice for or prove myself to. They were the ones who showed up, just as I had always hoped my family would. A few weeks later, I received a letter from my mom. It was a simple note, handwritten, no doubt carefully constructed. She apologized, saying she realized too late how she had treated me. She even mentioned how much she missed me and wanted to rebuild our relationship. It stung, reading it. I Knew it was sincere, but it also felt like another attempt to rewrite history, to make the past disappear with a few well-chosen words. I didn't respond. Instead, I focused on the work ahead. It was clear now that my family, as I had once known it, was never coming back. But that was okay. I wasn't the same person anymore. I had grown into someone stronger, someone who knew what it meant to stand up for herself, and as the months went on, I started to feel a deep sense of peace. I wasn't waiting for anyone to choose me. I wasn't waiting for anyone to show up. I had my own life now, a life full of purpose, real connections, and a future that wasn't defined by the mistakes of my past. On my next birthday, I didn't plan anything extravagant. It was just me and a handful of close friends, sitting around my living room, laughing, sharing stories, and eating cake. There was no empty chair for my parents or my brother. But there was something much more valuable: the people who actually cared about me. The people who chose to be there, not because they had to, but because they wanted to. I looked around the room and realized that I hadn't lost anything. I had gained everything. As the years passed, I found myself growing even more into the person I had always hoped I could be, someone strong, independent, and free from the burden of other people's expectations. I wasn't defined by the things my family tried to impose on me anymore. I had built a life that reflected who I truly was, not the version of me they wanted me to be. The foundation continued to grow, and I watched it flourish in ways I had never imagined. New scholarship programs were established, and we helped more students than I ever thought possible. The work was difficult, but every success was a reminder of the right path I had chosen. For the first time in years, I was doing something purely for others, not for anyone's approval or recognition, but something changed in me that I wasn't expecting. As I poured myself into my work and surrounded myself with the people who genuinely cared about me, I started to understand something deeper. I didn't need to heal the broken parts of my past with my family. What I had built, the life I had chosen, was more than enough. One day, out of the blue, I received a message from Ryan. At first, I hesitated. It had been so long since I had spoken to him, since I had even thought about him. The message was short, almost like an afterthought. I've been thinking a lot about everything. I'm sorry. I know I messed up. It wasn't an apology I had been waiting for, and honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted it. But something inside me told me to respond. Not because I was looking for closure or reconciliation, but because I had reached a place where I could finally speak from a place of peace. I wrote back, "I appreciate your apology, Ryan. But we both know it's more than just words. The actions we take from here are what matter." There was no immediate response. But I didn't need one. I had already found my peace. The damage had been done, and no apology could erase the years of hurt, manipulation, and betrayal. But that didn't mean I was holding on to it anymore. I had let go. In the following months, there were small attempts from my parents to reconnect. They started sending occasional texts, often about trivial things, like news articles or memories from when I was younger. At first, I ignored them, not out of spite, but because I didn't need to revisit a past that had only brought me pain. Slowly, however, I began to reply. Not because I was trying to rebuild a relationship, but because I had healed enough to no longer carry the weight of resentment. It wasn't about forgiveness, it was about freeing myself from their hold on my life. I continued to move forward with my own family, my real family, the ones who supported me unconditionally. And in doing so, I realized that my family was never just about blood. It was about the people who showed up, the ones who loved me for who I was, not what I could provide or how much I conformed to their narrative. I had finally become the author of my own story. And for the first time in my life, I was proud of the person I had become. I had faced the darkest parts of my past, confronted the lies and manipulation, and emerged stronger, more compassionate, and more true to myself than I ever could have imagined. On my next birthday, I sat with my friends, a small group of people who had become my family, and smiled. The past had shaped me, but it didn't define me anymore. I wasn't the same person I had been when my family rejected me. I had found something far more valuable, a sense of self-worth that came not from their approval, but from the love and respect I had earned from those who mattered. I raised my glass, surrounded by people who truly cared about me, and said, "Here's to family. The one we choose." And for the first time in my life, I felt truly at peace. As the years continued to pass, the echoes of my family's absence faded, replaced by a quiet, steady confidence I had never known before. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving, not in spite of my family's rejection, but because of it. The pain of their indifference had forced me to look inward, to discover parts of myself that I had buried under their expectations and demands. And in doing so, I found a strength I hadn't realized I had. My work with the foundation flourished, and the impact we made in the community grew. We were helping students pursue their dreams, supporting families in need, and creating a ripple effect that extended far beyond the scope of what I could have imagined when I started. There were no longer any distractions, no manipulative phone calls, no guilt trips, no false promises. Just real people coming together for a common cause. And it was enough. I also found new friendships, deeper connections with people who truly understood me. They celebrated my successes, stood by me through my struggles, and accepted me for who I was, without judgment, without strings attached. It was in their eyes that I found a sense of belonging that I had longed for in my own family. They weren't bound by blood, but by love, respect, and shared values. I realized that these people, the ones who showed up, who supported me without asking for anything in return, they were my true family. And they were more than enough. I didn't need to seek validation from a family that had never seen me for who I truly was. Instead, I found solace in the fact that I had created my own family, built on trust, mutual respect, and unconditional love. As my birthday came around again, I reflected on the path that had brought me here. I had started out thinking I needed my family's approval, their love, their presence in my life. But now, I understood that love couldn't be demanded or forced. It had to be earned, and it had to be given freely. The love I had found was the kind that wasn't contingent on anything other than being who I was. And it was real. On the day of my birthday, I didn't make any big plans. I simply gathered a few of my closest friends, the ones who had been there through it all, and we spent the evening laughing, reminiscing, and just enjoying each other's company. There were no expectations, no drama, just a quiet celebration of the life I had built, a life that was mine, completely and entirely. As the night drew to a close, I looked around at my friends, and I realized that I had everything I had ever needed. I had a family that chose me, a family that supported me, and a family that truly loved me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the sting of longing for a family that never truly saw me. I had become the person I always wanted to be, not because of them, but in spite of them. And I was proud of it. So, when the last of my friends left and I was alone, I smiled to myself. I had finally let go of the past. I had healed, grown, and found the peace I had always searched for. The family I had once dreamed of, the one that loved me unconditionally, was right in front of me, not in the blood that ran through my veins, but in the people who stood by me, who chose me every single day, and for the first time in my life, I was truly at peace. As the days passed, I felt a sense of calm that had been absent from my life for so long. I had finally come to terms with everything, the choices, the losses, the betrayals. They were all part of my journey, but they no longer defined me. I had created something stronger than what I had ever thought possible. I had created my own future, and in doing so, I had built a life that was truly mine. The foundation, my work, my friends, these were the things that mattered. Not the broken ties with my family, not the empty apologies, not the ghosts of the past. In letting go of what no longer served me, I had embraced a new kind of freedom. One where I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to live my life. Where I wasn't seeking validation from anyone who couldn't see my worth. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't sad. I was just whole. And for the first time in my life, I could say that with complete honesty. I had learned to let go of the need to be anything other than myself. The rest of the world could accept me or not, but it was their choice. My choice was clear. I was done trying to fit into a mold that wasn't mine, and in doing so, I had found the life I was meant to live. So, when the sun set on my next birthday, I knew that I had everything I needed. And as I looked around at the people who truly loved me, I realized that I hadn't lost a thing. I had gained everything. And that was more than enough, and with that, I closed the door on the past, for good.